What's up, everybody? Nate here, and the United States has been the global economic superpower for the better half of the last century, but that all might be changing sometime soon. China and Brazil just formed an agreement to do business in their own currencies, effectively creating a new reserve currency for the world. And there's a potential that this could end up replacing the US dollar as the reserve currency of the world. So what exactly is happening here? Well, to understand why China and Brazil and Russia and a ton of other countries throughout the world would want to try to dethrone the US dollar, well, you need to understand what a reserve currency is. A reserve currency is basically the currency of the entire world. So it's a single currency that pretty much every country wants to use in order to do business. And if you think about it, this makes a lot of sense, because if a lot of other countries decided that they were going to use their own currency or use a bunch of different currencies, then nobody would have the same money and everything would have a different value. So they like to use the same currency, and that means that they have a reserve currency. So they like to spend, they like to save, and they like to do business all with one particular currency. Now, the United States dollar became the reserve currency of the world sometime between the end of World War I and the end of World War II. Now, the previous reserve currency was the British pound, but the United States at the time was seen a lot more as economically stable, and our military was a little bit stronger than Great Britain, so a lot of countries wanted to do business with us, and pretty much since then, the US has been the reserve currency of the world. So now flash forward, the United States has been the reserve currency for a while, and what exactly does that mean? When a country's money becomes the reserve currency of the world, they have a ton of advantages, mainly because everybody wants your money to save and hold and to pay their own citizens, because your money is backed by economic stability and a really strong military. It means here in the United States, we're able to grow our economy a whole lot faster. We're able to take on a lot of foreign debt because other countries want our money. They want to take on our debt because our money is so valuable, and because their money isn't as valuable, that makes their economies a lot wealthier. That in turn grows a lot of other nations. So like I said, it allows the United States to print a lot more money. It allows the United States to grow a lot faster because we are the reserve currency. And like I said, it offers other nations stability because they know when they use the United States dollar, well, the United States isn't going anywhere anytime soon. Versus if they use another country's money and then that country goes bankrupt, well, now they have a whole bunch of money that is basically useless. But recently, we've been running into some problems with the United States dollar, and other countries are starting to take note, and they want to effectively get rid of the dollar as the world's reserve currency. And the main reason has to do with inflation. What you have to understand here is there is a finite supply of dollars, and to create more dollars, well, the Federal Reserve literally needs to turn on the printing machine and print out US dollars, but that sort of devalues all of the dollars that are currently in circulation. Now, prior to 1971, this wasn't a huge problem in the United States because we had something called the gold standard. Basically, all of our money, all of our paper dollars were tied to a physical asset. So the United States government would essentially hold on to gold bars for every dollar that is printed. At the time, Americans could take their real dollars and exchange that money for gold, but this also creates a huge problem. A country is basically limited to how much gold it can actually refine and create and then hold, and you can't do all of that very quickly, which means the United States government couldn't just print a lot of money in order to expand. But that all changed in 1971 when President Nixon essentially suspended the gold standard. Now, you could not go to a vault and exchange your US dollars for gold ounces anymore, but what it meant was the United States was no longer tied down to a tangible asset, and they could print as much money as they wanted. What that has created over time, though, is a lot of money printing, and like I said before, when you have a lot more dollars in circulation, you also have a lot more spending and a lot more inflation. Well, the reserve currency of the world means that other countries like to hold on to our money. They like to save in US dollars because it's really stable and it's really valuable, but as inflation has gone up since 1971, well, a lot of countries are starting to see the US dollar as not as stable anymore. They don't want to hold on to US dollars because we have an inflation issue. And over the last 20 years or so, the United States Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department have pumped a ton of dollars into the US economy in order to get us out of some issues. issues. The 2008 Great Financial Crash and then the Great Recession following meant that the United States Federal Reserve dropped its benchmark interest rates to near 0% and kept them there for almost a decade. Then we had the pandemic-related recession in 2020 where the Federal Reserve again lowered its benchmark interest rates. So we have had a ton of spending and a ton of really low interest rates and lots of money printing. Around 80% of the dollars that are currently in circulation were printed or created over the last 2 or 3 years. In 2020, we had around $3 trillion in circulation, and today we have over 20 trillion. That is a lot of money, and it basically means that every country, including China and Brazil and Russia and anybody else that is holding US dollars, well, all of that money is getting a lot less valuable, which brings us to today, what China and Brazil just did. The BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, China, South Africa, and India are all sort of joining forces right now in order to dethrone the US dollar. They want to create their own reserve currency that the entire rest of the world will use, and that could create some big issues for the US. Now, it's important to mention here that countries have been trying to do this for years to dethrone the US dollar, but it's been pretty difficult. Other nations like China and Japan hold a lot of US debt. However, they've been pushing back on a lot of that debt because of the inflationary issues that we're facing here in the United States. The main sort of obstacle in the way of the BRICS nations is they have to sort of prove that the United States dollar is not as stable as this new currency that they want to create. However, the United States really isn't helping its case here. Every major empire throughout world history has sort of gone through a few different phases. They've had their formation, their rise to the top, and then their decline. And a lot of experts would agree that the United States is in its declining years. So what exactly does that mean? Well, the financial system in the United States right now is kind of having a debt issue. Because we have spent years and years borrowing from other nations, and not only that, the Federal Reserve printing a lot of money, that means that we now have to figure out a way to pay all of this money back. But the United States federal government is in a massive deficit. They don't make enough money, and they really only have two ways of getting revenue. They can tax their citizens, which nobody really likes, or they can print more money, and 9 times out of 10, they just print their way out of issues, but that causes inflation. So Congress continues to raise the debt ceiling, and every single time we have major collapses, whether it's in the banking sector or it's in real estate, the United States federal government bails everyone out. And the debt just keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and eventually it becomes impossible to pay off. Now, when you're the reserve currency of the world, that's not really that big of a deal because other countries want to take on your money so that they can continue to grow. But when you're not the reserve currency, all of that debt becomes a whole lot costlier. Eventually, it just becomes way too expensive for any country to afford anymore. We saw this with the Dutch Empire, we saw this with the British Empire, and we're starting to see it with the United States Empire. The US pumps a ton of money into its military in order to protect the US dollar and our entire financial system. Meanwhile, we have a lot of other political issues right now that are sort of causing issues within the country itself, but other countries are starting to get a lot stronger and forming their own reserve currencies in order to take down the US dollar. And eventually the United States just is not going to be able to keep up because they have trillions of dollars in debt. So what exactly does this reserve currency country do? Well, they start to get a little bit tighter, and that is exactly what the Federal Reserve has done over the last year. They have been raising their interest rates to make the dollar a whole lot stronger, to pull some of those dollars out of the system. However, remember, a lot of countries also have US dollars. With the dollar getting stronger, that means it's more expensive to take on, and with the dollar being the reserve currency of the world, countries are still doing business in US dollars, but all of those dollars are harder to come by, so they don't want to have to rely on really expensive dollars in order to do business. That means dollars are becoming a detriment to a lot of these countries, so they don't want to hold on to it anymore. They want to hold on to a currency that is a lot less inflationary. But like I said before, no country has been able to do this just yet because they have their own political instability to worry about, and the United States is just strong enough to continue to be the reserve currency of the world. But just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it couldn't happen in the future. So it's definitely something to pay attention to, and it's definitely definitely something that could affect your money directly. I can't control what the United States government does. I can't control what the reserve currency of the world is. So I prefer to do things that are in my own control. So for instance, with the US dollar potentially losing value and falling victim to inflation, then you don't want to tie all of your personal finances to US dollars. You want to hold on to things that are an asset and that are going to continue to appreciate in value. Things like stocks and real estate and commodities like gold and silver and maybe even cryptocurrency are not directly related to the US dollar. These are things that people want because they go up in value. And as long as you always have things, and as long as you have things that other people want, then those things may continue to go up in value over time. High inflationary times means that the value of your money is going down, but when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates and makes the dollar a lot stronger, well then that means your savings at banks typically get a whole lot higher, but those saving interest rates are not nearly enough to beat inflation. So at the end of the day, you are still losing a ton of money here. So the key here is to invest your money. You want to buy assets that are going to appreciate in value so that way you can build wealth and you don't have to worry about what the Federal Reserve and the Treasury Department or what other countries are going to do with their money because you are financially sound. And I know it sounds super scary, the United States being in its economic decline, but other empires have gone through this before and they're still standing. If the United States is no longer the reserve currency of the world, well, that doesn't mean the end. It just means that you need to be a little bit smarter financially, and that is exactly where financial education comes in. You need to know what to do with your money, you need to know how to save, you need to know where to save, and you need to know what to invest in to actually build your wealth. All of that can potentially protect you against what could be coming in the future, and more importantly, it gives you control over your own finances, which in turn gives you control over your own life, and it enables you to capitalize on opportunities that could be coming in the future, which is a certain freedom that only the wealthy have. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to subscribe before you go if you haven't already. And if you're looking for more business and financial news breakdowns, we are covering everything over on Market Brief 6 days a week. So if you want to subscribe for free, you can do that by clicking the link in this corner right here. And I'm covering more finance and business news on this channel 7 days a week, and I've got another video ready for you right there, so be sure to check that out before you go. That is it for me, everybody. Be kind out there, and I'll see you all in the next one.